That's what happened. Why psychical research turned into parapsychology during the 1930s. There was a lot going on with the mediums Marjorie, George Valentine, Rudy Schneider, and so forth. I'm convinced that all three of those were legitimate mediums, but they all had scientists sitting with them, including Dr. Rhine, who was one of the founders of parapsychology, who just didn't understand what was going on. They refused to believe that spirits were involved, so they wrote it all off as fraud. And parapsychology replaced psychical research because, parapsychology wanted nothing to do with spirits or life after death. They just focused on ESP and psi, and that's the way it still is. Parapsychology tries to avoid any discussion of life after death or a spirit world,
which is so unfortunate, and that's why we came out with our website, which is already making waves, which we're very excited about. But let's talk about you. I understand that you won a prize. Talk about that.
Oh, the Bigelow contest. That was an essay contest that Robert Bigelow, who was an aeronautical space entrepreneur, and he's located in Vegas. He sponsored a contest with $500,000 going to the winner, and I think $250,000 to second, and I don't know, $125,000 to third, and then there were the next 10, $50,000 each. So I was one of the $50,000 winners for my essay, which was a simulated court trial between the survival school and the School of Materialism. What I had in my simulated trial was the survival school suing the School of Materialism for having caused so much despair and lack of hope and so forth through their malfeasance and misfeasance and so forth. And what I did is I called 11 witnesses. I would have called more, except there's a 25,000 word limit to the essay. My witnesses were all the early pioneers, starting with Judge Edmonds, John Edmonds, who was probably the first psychical researcher during the 1850s. And I called Robert Hare, Sir Oliver Lodge. And what I did is I used their actual words from their books, their reports, as their testimony. I would, the attorney representing the plaintiff in this case was Edward Randall, who was a famous Buffalo attorney that was involved in psychical research with Emily French of Rochester, New York, I think it was. Anyway, he would put the questions to the 11 witnesses, and 11 witnesses, the answers to their questions were their actual words, and so I tried to make a case that from the testimony of those 11 witnesses, from Judge Edmonds, Alpha Russell Wallace, Sir William Crooks, Dr. Richard Hodgson, Sir Oliver Lodge, and several others, that how they all started out as skeptics and came to believe that what they were witnessing was genuine, and that it all pointed to consciousness surviving death. And I guess the judges saw it as good enough for a $50,000 prize, but not a $500,000 one.
Good for you. That's great. But I see that they backed off in the end, and they just became another consciousness institute, which is too bad, because 80% to 90% actually is the statistic of people in the world still don't believe in the survival of death, which is crazy. That's really a statistic which is, frankly, it's one of the main reasons why finally Craig Hogan and I started our website, because that's stupid. I mean, that's like not believing that the sun is going to shine. The evidence is every bit as strong for the survival of death as it is for any scientific principle that is accepted as fact. Any scientific principle that is accepted as fact. I don't care what you name. That's how strong the evidence is. It's just that science will not look at it. So we're looking at it. and we're presenting it, and that's what we do. And what I love is that it's already getting noticed. So we're going to do what we can to get a lot more notice. But now,
I don't think it's getting as much notice as it should. I mean, over the 25 years or so that I've been involved, I just don't see that much or that many people. You know, I do see it on the internet to some extent, but I'm 85 now, so I've had a lot of friends and relatives pass on in the past year, and I attend funerals and attempt to talk to people about it, but nobody wants to talk about it, you know. And those who belong to a religion, it's still the humdrum heaven and horrific hell. You know, they don't want to talk about it. I have a relative now who is grieving the loss of his wife and also undergoing cancer treatment, and I've tried to get him to read a few things, and he resists it. You know, he'd rather watch football games or whatever.
I think it's really tragic. A lot of people are terrified, and what Craig and I decided is, we could very well do the same thing. I mean, we know for certain where we're going, and we're delighted about it, but we just cannot close our eyes for the last time without at least trying to help people understand the glory that awaits them. It would be wrong, morally wrong for us to keep it to ourselves anymore. And that's why we decided to share it with the world, which is what you're doing too with your wonderful books. Everyone, Michael Tymn, Tymn, there's an N at the end. Anything he wrote, you can trust. Not only is it flawless, but it's fun to read. His books aren't too long and they're not too scholarly. They're fun to read and they're true. So I just can recommend his books without reservation. Now, people can contact you through White Crow Books. Is that it?
Right, White Crow Books, which is in
England. Their website?
That's it, whitecrowbooks.com.
That's it.
If you just put White Crow Books into a internet search, it'll bring up, they have, I don't know, almost 100 books, I think, that's been published by White Crow, including 7 of mine. But
they're really excellent. They're based in Great Britain. They're really good. Mm-hmm. And very, very scholarly too. But no, I just think your books are wonderful because they're, as I say, they're scholarly and they're flawless in terms of quality, but they also are fun to read. Nowadays, people just don't want to sit down with anything heavy. They want to read what's fun to read. And now, one more thing you were talking to me about. You were talking about how running is related to, explain that, related to life after death. I just got lost in that one, Michael. Tell me.
Yeah, well, no, a lot. There are a lot of analogies, but I started out, as I mentioned, I was in the insurance business, even though I majored in journalism. However, I had a part-time job with a local newspaper covering running, swimming, bicycling, triathlons, and so forth. So that was sort of my weekend job, and I did that for 24 years. And then I got to writing for some national running magazines, and almost all my writing before I retired in 2002 was about running. And I began to see a lot of analogies in running and dying. And I think the best example is the mile run. I mean, the mile run can be divided into 4 parts. So you've got the first lap, which is youth, second lap, which is young adulthood, the third lap, which is middle age, and the fourth lap is old age. And if you really take a close look at it, you see how the runner progresses or regresses along the way till the final 100 yards when he's weary. I had a quote here from Roger Bannister. Roger Bannister was the first person to run a 4-minute mile, and I had it someplace on my desk here that I was going to quote it, but can't seem to. Wait, here it is. he says, Roger Bannister said, the faint line of the finish line stood ahead as a haven of peace after the struggle. And as he took a leap at the finish line, it was like a man taking his last spring to save himself from the chasm of threatening to engulf him. So, once you've finished, I mean, there's that last 20 or 30 yards when you run out of oxygen and you're just striving for the finish line and your legs are ready to collapse, your heart's ready to give out. And then, there's some pain. There's, trying to catch your breath for a few minutes if you're well-conditioned. If you're not a well-conditioned runner, it may take much longer than a few minutes. But then there's an elation that comes after that recovery from after the few minutes. And I think that elation is what we experience after we've died. I mean, it's the same thing. We're exhausted at the finish line of death, and then, there's some recovery time, some awakening time required right after the finish line, and then it's more. There's relief. There's awakening, depending on how advanced the person is. In what condition the person was in the first place. I mean, if the person was not in very good condition, it's going to take a long time to recover. But the well-conditioned athlete, he's back. After 2 or 3 minutes, breathing normally, and I think that's an analogy that can be carried over to the afterlife. If we've lived a good life, right. And we recover quickly, and if we haven't, if we're like the runner that shouldn't be out there competing, then it's going to take a much longer time to awaken.
That's right. And people who have been very sick or they will go to a care home actually after death. A lot of people don't understand that. That's why we typically recommend that you not attempt to contact your loved one who has died, especially if they have been ill and before their death or had Alzheimer's or something, because they're going to be in a care home and be recovering for 6 months sometimes. And then after that, they'll be much better. And just like that athlete who needed more time to recover after crossing the finish line. Good analogy. That's a very good analogy, yeah. Michael. Mm-hmm. So what do you want people to take away from today? Just give it time, give it patience, and understand it's not that easy to communicate from the other side. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, well, I think it's something that comes over time, that you have to just keep seeking and reading and listening or whatever. It took me about 10 years before I really began to understand mediumship. I think I started around 1995. I started earlier than that on near-death experiences and other phenomena, but 1995 to 1999, I read about it, and it just didn't make sense. And one of the problems was that, these scholars, James Hislop and Sir Oliver Lodge and Hodgson and so forth, they could go 3 pages with one paragraph, and it took a long time to figure out what they were saying, and that's why I decided, at being trained as a reporter, to short paragraphs and get to the point. First of all, you could read a Hislop and go 3 pages. What the heck is he saying? Finally, at the last paragraph, you realize what he said, but then you've got to go back and reread it to really totally understand it. So what my intention in the first place was to try and simplify everything they had to say and put it in layman's language so that it wouldn't be so difficult to understand. And I think I've succeeded to some extent, at least by some of the comments, the book reviews and so forth that I've seen on at Amazon.com and other places. So that's the main message, I think, is don't give up on it right away. Read as much as you can and as many authors or writers as you can, and expect it to take time to really understand. I don't understand it completely now. I mean, after 25 or 30 years of writing about it, I still have a lot of questions, but I've got a